Imagine for a moment that the 10 Commandments, those timeless words etched in stone, hold a prophecy so powerful that it could alter the destiny of humanity in the end times. What if these commandments are not just rules, but a divine warning? We've been overlooking for centuries. Intrigued? Let me tell you, the clues are hidden in plain sight. These ancient laws reveal a battle between good and evil that transcends time and space. And here's the answer. By heeding these commandments, we not only stay anchored in faith, but also prepare for what's to come. So, if you find inspiration in Jesus and his message, make sure to subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're from or how Jesus has performed miracles in your life. Remember, Jesus will bless you and he is always with you. At the heart of one of the Bible's most powerful narratives lies an extraordinary encounter. The trembling, fiery scene at Mount Sinai, where God himself delivered the 10 Commandments to his chosen people. The imagery strikes awe, fire engulfing the mountain, thunder roaring through the skies, the earth quaking beneath the feet of those assembled, and a voice that transcends all earthly sounds, the very voice of God cascading down the mountain like a waterfall of pure, unadulterated power. It is a scene so profoundly etched in spiritual history that its significance and depth extend far beyond the mere presentation of rules or guidelines. It's an encounter that embodies covenant, worship, and preparation for spiritual warfare. Layers of depth that often remain concealed by a superficial reading. Let us unfold this tapestry of divine revelation, exploring not just the immediate ramifications of these commandments, but also the prophetic echoes that resound through time, possibly even into our own era. According to the narrative in Exodus 20, the voice of God at Mount Sinai was not an ethereal whisper or a quietly dispersed directive. It was an unmistakable, commanding force that established a covenant between God and his people. A covenant that was as much about identity and relationship as it was about obedience. God did not merely hand down a set of rules. He carved out a blueprint for his people's spiritual journey, placing each commandment within a broader context of worship and allegiance. The commandments delivered that day were not arbitrary decrees, but divine principles directly connecting heaven and earth. From a purely moral perspective, these guidelines are certainly foundational, touchstones of ethics and jurisprudence. But their spiritual significance is deeper, for they represent divine attributes communicated to humanity: justice, love, faithfulness, and reverence. They become more than behavioral directives. They transform into reflections of the divine, nature, manifestations of God's will, designed to shepherd humanity toward holiness. Amidst this sacred encounter at Sinai, we witness the interplay of anticipation, reverence, and holy fear. The Israelites were not mere recipients of God's laws. They stood as participants in a divine drama, chosen and set apart, yet profoundly vulnerable to the weight of God's presence. They could feel the magnitude of the divine covenant pressing in on them, a pledge not only of what they were to do, but of whom they were meant to become in the journey ahead. This covenant entailed a binding promise that demanded an unwavering loyalty, a life of both personal and communal sanctification within a world rife with spiritual challenges. However, let us stretch our contemplation further, pondering the layered meanings potentially embedded within these commandments. Is it possible that one or more of these divine statutes serves as a prophetic beacon, firing a warning shot across the ages to the final generation? Could there be a specific commandment foreshadowing an element of spiritual warfare yet to unfold in humanity's timeline? In measuring these ancient words against the current framework of modern existence, believers today might find astonishing relevance and urgency in texts that seem to speak directly to the human condition, cautioning against future deception and urging vigilance. It's not far-fetched, then, to inquire whether the commandments might signal scenarios pertinent to potential future adversities that include spiritual subterfuge, deceit, or moral compromise on a scale unimaginable in prior epochs. The dynamics of this divine encounter at Sinai point towards an overarching theme that transcends time: worship. True worship is rooted in obedience to these divine decrees, manifest through a life aligned with God's nature. This worship becomes both a shield and a sword in spiritual warfare, not just a ritual or tradition, but a living, breathing expression of allegiance and trust in the divine. Mount Sinai in all its majesty, that's not simply a historical record. It remains a spiritual landmark, a place where God established His voice and His will intimately into the hearts of His people. As we face both visible and invisible battles in our own lives, we would do well to revisit the voice that first called out on that trembling mountain, listening not just for rules to follow, but for the deeper whispers of a divine strategy, guiding us as we navigate the currents of our present-day spiritual landscape. The prophetic dimension of the commandments urges a profound contemplation, alerting believers that aligning with God's voice involves preparedness, readiness for the unexpected, vigilant guard against whispers of deception, and an enduring commitment to reflect the divine image in a world longing for truth. Sinai's fiery outburst speaks across the ages. Are we listening? In the aftermath of the divine proclamations from Mount Sinai, where the very air vibrated with celestial echoes, God's commandments were not mere whispers of morality, but profound imperatives with eternal implications. As the thunder rolled and the mountain quaked, one could not help but marvel at the depths of the commandments, each a harp-string note of divine wisdom and foresight. Nestled among these is the second commandment, sternly warning against the crafting or veneration of any graven image, a warning that reverberates with vivid poignancy into the prophecies of Revelation. The second commandment, found in Exodus 20:4-6, reads, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them." This commandment serves as a spiritual boundary, cautioning the faithful against the seductive nature of idolatry, a timeless temptation that promises power and connection, but ultimately leads one away from the divine. This ancient directive transcends time, emerging with prophetic urgency as it casts its shadow upon the dramatic unfolding of events in the book of Revelation. Within the apocalyptic visions of Revelation 13:14-15, a significant parallel emerges. As the false prophet leads the world into idol worship, asserting power through the beast's image, this image, empowered to speak and deceive, becomes the focal point of a widespread act of spiritual defiance. Here, the Antichrist system is positioned starkly against the declaration made thousands of years prior at Sinai. The beast's image is not simply a symbol of political power or religious dominance. It is spiritual idolatry on a global scale, an affront to the very essence of divine worship as outlined by God. The correlation between the second commandment and Revelation's warnings against the beast's image can be perceived as more than mere forewarning. It becomes a protective prophecy, a preparatory guide for those who choose to see, urging resistance against deception. When the world is seduced by the image that promises continuity of existence, prosperity, or supernatural wisdom, the second commandment stands as a beacon of truth, reminding believers to remain steadfast and undeterred in their worship of the unseen God. In examining this profound connection, one cannot ignore the emotional appeal bound within the seductive nature of images and idols. Throughout history, idols have been more than mere physical objects. They represented the deep longings of humanity, a desire for control, prosperity, revelation, or connectivity, often manipulated by dark forces to draw hearts away from God. The beast's image in Revelation is the culmination of these desires, manufactured into a powerful tool of deception and allegiance. For the modern believer, understanding the significance of the second commandment in this context is crucial. It compels a soul-searching question not only of where one's allegiance lies, but also of what invisible forces grace or govern their heart, subtly guiding their desires and beliefs. Is one truly worshipping God in spirit and truth, as encapsulated by the second commandment, or is one's heart seduced by the siren song of modern idols promising instantaneous fulfillment? Delving deeper into the symbolic conflict depicted in Revelation uncovers another layer, the portrayal of an ultimate cosmic struggle, a deceitful counterpoint to the divine covenants. This battle transcends the physical into the ethereal. As Satan's machinations attempt to supplant God's tenets, with idolatrous veneration. The Antichrist and the false prophet wield the beast's image as a tangible manifestation of Satan's rebellion, echoing a tragic history of past idolatry that led nations from God. In a world teetering on the brink of prophetic fulfillment, believers must internalize the second commandment, not just as a historical decree, but as a shield and warning against modern delusions. It is an invitation to spiritual vigilance, discerning the subtle and not-so-subtle idols seeking enthronement in one's life. It calls for a profound examination of one's spiritual foundation, casting aside the trappings of material and sensational images in favor of the unadorned and unchanging truth of God. As this divine tapestry of warnings and prophecies continues to weave through time, the second commandment emerges with renewed relevance, urging each believer to resist the gravitational pull towards the tangible representations of spiritual aspirations, whether they take the form of political entities, technological marvels, or cultural trends, seeking instead to worship in spirit and truth. In doing so, one stands fortified against the deception that will characterize the final confrontation between light and shadow, remaining a candle in a darkening world, touched by the timeless flame of faithfulness ignited long ago at Sinai. In examining the layers of divine instructions given to humanity, the fourth commandment emerges as a beacon of divine intent, enshrined in the command to observe the Sabbath. To truly appreciate its significance in the cosmic narrative, we begin with Exodus 28:11, which lays down the foundation for keeping the Sabbath holy. This command is more than a mere invitation to rest. It is a profound calling to enter into a divine rhythm established by God Himself. As the world spins ever further into chaos and uncertainty, understanding the Sabbath as a mark of loyalty in the last days becomes paramount. The passage in Revelation 14:12 further highlights the Sabbath's crucial place in the eschatological timeline. Here, the end-time saints are identified not just as those with faith in Jesus, but specifically as keepers of God's commandments, with the Sabbath standing as a distinctive emblem of allegiance. This paints a vivid picture of a people wholly devoted to divine precepts amidst global turmoil. But why does the Sabbath hold such a place of prominence when it comes to expressions of loyalty? The answer may well be tied to the commandment's dual role as both a physical and spiritual act of worship. Historically, attempts to alter divine law have been fueled by human ambition for control, a distortion prophesied in Daniel 7:25. Here, a power is described that seeks to change times and laws, an echo of humanity's perennial struggle to assert authority over divinely ordained order. This prophecy resonates through history into modernity, as the world has seen various institutions and powers attempt to reinvent what God established. Central to this changing tide has been the quiet yet profound shift away from Sabbath observance, a shift that some interpret as a marker of allegiance to earthly authority over divine command. When we delve into the spiritual essence of the Sabbath, its significance becomes even more apparent. The Sabbath is a sanctuary in time, a day disconnected from human labor and societal pressures, directly linking us with the Creator. Observing. The Sabbath is an act of resistance against a world demanding constant productivity and conformity, offering instead a space where God's order, not man's, reigns supreme. As believers in the end times, recognizing and maintaining this sacred span of time signals an unequivocal loyalty to God's kingdom over earthly dominions. In the concluding moments of Earth's history, a line is drawn, a spiritual line deeper than any mere tradition. This line separates true worship from counterfeit devotion. The Sabbath represents not just a day, but a posture of life that aligns with God's original intent. As society advances towards a climax described in Revelation, a false system of worship challenges the Sabbath, creating a conflict between the Lamb and the beast. This is not a mere battle over days or practices, but over the fundamental allegiance of the heart. The very nature of the Sabbath stands in opposition to a world system demanding allegiance, a system personified in the beastly power of Revelation. Where the beast demands worship out of fear and coercion, the Sabbath invites worship through love and freedom, Keeping the Sabbath is a declaration of independence from the systems of man, an unwavering stand in a torrent of compromise. It is this dedication to God's commandments, in the face of overwhelming apparitions of power, that distinguishes His people in the last days. To the end-time believer, the Sabbath is not just a day marked on the calendar, but a prophetic emblem of allegiance, each observance a mini-battle won against the encroaching tide of false worship. As history thunders towards its pinnacle, will the Sabbath hold its place as the fortress of the faithful? In this ultimate confrontation, the fourth commandment rings as a clarion call to remembrance and reflection, a call that echoes through history and into the hearts of those standing on the precipice of eternity. Thus the Sabbath composes a rhythm that transcends earthly monarchies, echoing the rest of Eden's peace and the promise of recreation. As the conflict between the Lamb and the beast rages on, the Sabbath remains a stark proclamation of loyalty to the Creator, an emblem of hope that withstands the storm. In the heart of the conflict to come, may we find our anchor in the Sabbath, the embodiment of trust in the divine order and the assurance of what is to come for those who remain faithful. In the swirling cosmos of biblical prophecy, Revelation 13 stands as a monumental testament to the epic confrontation between divinity and deception. It unveils a dramatic scenario where the world is drawn into an intricate dance, choosing between paths of profound consequence. This chapter delves into the spiritual realities at play, a global machinery demanding unwavering allegiance to the beast, juxtaposed with the transcendent call of God's voice echoed through His commandments. As the text intricately weaves its tale, Revelation 13 illuminates the emergence of a beastly power, persuasive and potent, compelling the nations to its cause. With an authority steeped in seduction and coercion, this beast institutes a system enforcing conformity, and those who resist face dire repercussions. This global tableau demands our attention and discernment, as it presents not just a political force, but a deeply spiritual conflict, echoing the age-old battle that began in Eden. The stakes are unmistakably high. As history rushes toward its appointed climax, this prophetic vision lays bare a choice that transcends mere political alliances or ideological preferences. It is a choice of allegiance, either to the eternal voice of God or to the temporal power of the beast. Herein lies the final test, an ultimate examination that calls each heart to weigh its loyalties on the scales of eternity. At the heart of this debate are the commandments, not as relics of an ancient past, but as living oracles spoken from Mount Sinai, the very breath of God imparted to humanity. Of particular focus are the second and fourth commandments, whose prophetic significance in the end times cannot be overstated. Deuteronomy 30:19 poignantly encapsulates this critical juncture, imploring us to choose life over death, blessing over curse. The second commandment, which forbids idolatry, contrasts sharply with the worship of the beast, a form of idolatry wrapped in religious and political zeal. This vivid juxtaposition challenges us to examine the idols of our hearts, asking, what silent, subtle allegiances might sway us away from the true worship of God? In this, the commandments do more than instruct. They prophetically warn and guide. The fourth commandment, revered for instituting the Sabbath, emerges as a definitive marker of divine allegiance. Its call to rest in God's provision and sanctify His appointed time becomes a bulwark against the beast's usurpation of divine order. The Sabbath, representing spiritual rest and recognition of God as Creator, stands diametrically opposed to the relentless, oppressive demands of a world fallen under the beast's sway. In this cosmic tableau, where does your allegiance lie? Will you heed the voice that reverberated from Sinai, or succumb to the siren call of the beast? This is not merely a choice between two paths, but a decision that determines one's place in the unfolding plan of redemption. The commandments, imbued with divine authority, become prophetic tools, signposts guiding us amid the chaos of the final days. As the weight of this decision bears down upon the soul, one must reckon with the profound reality that God's voice still speaks, echoing through Scripture and resonating in the hearts of those who seek Him. In a world increasingly characterized by moral ambiguity and shifting allegiances, the call to stand firm grows ever more urgent. Will you, in the days ahead, declare your loyalty to the voice that called forth light from darkness, life from the void? Or will you bow to the beast, ensnared by its deceptive allure? May your heart be ever attuned to the divine resonance of truth, that your choice in this ultimate test be guided by wisdom and grace. Choose, therefore, whom you will serve, with the knowledge that this decision echoes into eternity. This is the clarion call of Revelation 13, a message hidden in plain sight, yet profound in its impact, urging all who listen to hear and heed.